Most pilots believe the greatest threat to their aircraft comes from the engine, a sudden failure, a cracked cylinder, a prop strike. But the mechanism that will actually ground your fleet and drain your bank account is something you sign every single year without reading the fine print. It is your insurance policy, and the market behind it is undergoing a structural transformation that most general aviation owners are completely unprepared for. The general aviation insurance market has been hardening since 2019, and the correction is not cyclical. It is permanent. Between 2017 and 2022, underwriters absorbed catastrophic losses across the aviation sector. Lloyd's of London syndicates, which historically backstop a significant portion of light aircraft coverage globally, posted combined ratios well above 110% in aviation lines, meaning they paid out 110 for every $1 collected in premiums. The response was not temporary recalibration. It was the systematic exit of capital from the market. Several major aviation underwriters, including certain Berkshire Hathaway specialty divisions and independent Lloyd's syndicates, reduced their GA exposure dramatically or withdrew entirely. When capacity contracts, premiums rise, terms tighten, and coverage that was once standard becomes either unavailable or prohibitively expensive. The numbers bear this out. AOPA's 2023 Aviation Insurance Survey found that average premium increases for single-engine piston aircraft ranged from 18% to 35% year-over-year for pilots with clean records and stable flying profiles. For twin-engine piston operators, the increases were worse, often 40% or more. Pilots flying high-performance singles like the Cirrus SR-22 or Beechcraft Bonanza A-36 reported hull coverage renewals coming in 60% higher than the prior year, with underwriters simultaneously reducing their willingness to cover full hull value on older airframes. The liability side of the equation is equally distressed. Jury awards in aviation accident litigation have escalated dramatically over the past decade, driven in part by nuclear verdict trends in the broader tort environment. A 2021 AOPA report cited median liability payouts in fatal GA accidents exceeding $4.2 million, up from under $2 million a decade earlier. Underwriters price future risk based on past settlements, and those settlements are telling a brutal story. The airframe age problem compounds everything. The average age of the active general aviation fleet in the United States is now approximately 47 years. This is not a fleet in transition. It is a fleet in structural decline. Cessna stopped producing the 172 in 1986 and only restarted production in 1997 after a product liability reform. The Piper Cherokee series that dominates flight school inventories and private hangars across the country includes tens of thousands of airframes built in the 1960s and 1970s. Beechcraft Bonanzas from that same era are still flying IFR missions in IMC. Insurers are increasingly refusing to cover airframes over 30 or 40 years old at any reasonable premium, and when they do offer coverage, it comes with steep deductibles, enforced annual inspections by approved facilities, and hull value caps that bear no relationship to what the owner actually paid for the aircraft. A 1975 Cessna 182 that sold for $95,000 in 2021 may now find an underwriter willing to cover it for only $65,000 hull value, while charging a premium that assumes the worst-case loss scenario. Parts availability is the hidden crisis running parallel to the insurance problem. The FAA's production approval holder PAH system means that replacement parts for certificated aircraft must come from approved manufacturers, or PMA, parts manufacturer approval sources. For aircraft built in the 1960s and 1970s, many of the original PAHs no longer exist. Cessna, now part of Textron Aviation, has discontinued support for certain legacy components. Piper Aircraft, which went through multiple bankruptcies, has gaps in its parts availability for older Cherokee and Aero variants. The result is a growing gray market in overhauled components, unapproved parts, and FAA Form 813023 paperwork of questionable provenance. When an aircraft requires a part that no longer has an active PAH and no approved PMA alternative exists, The legal path forward is a field approval, a process that requires a designated airworthiness representative, DAR, or directly the FAA, costs thousands of dollars, and is not guaranteed. A broken aircraft waiting on a field approval for a stabilizer trim actuator can sit in a hangar for 6 to 12 months. During that time, the owner is paying hangar rent, loan payments if applicable, and insurance premiums on an aircraft they cannot legally fly. The mechanic shortage deepens this further. The FAA's 2023 aerospace forecast estimated a shortfall of approximately 12,000 aviation maintenance technicians, AMTs, over the next decade. Average technician age in the United States is above 50. Aviation maintenance programs at community colleges and vocational schools are losing enrollment. The pipeline is broken, and the effect on the GA owner is direct. Annual inspections that once cost $800 to $1,200 now routinely run $2,000 to $4,000 at busy shops, and scheduling lead times at quality facilities have extended to 3 and 4 months in many regions. An owner who discovers a squawk requiring significant airframe work faces not just the repair bill, but the carrying costs of an aircraft parked while mechanics with full schedules work through their backlog. The avionics mandate cycle is a third pressure vector that is often underestimated. ADS-B out-compliance, required in most controlled airspace since January 1, 2020, cost the average GA owner between $3,000 and $8,000 to implement, depending on the existing avionics stack and the complexity of the installation. That mandate is largely absorbed. The next wave is already forming. ICAO's PBN, Performance-Based Navigation, mandates are progressively pushing legacy VOR-only navigation into obsolescence. The FAA's VOR Minimum Operational Network, MON, program is systematically decommissioning VOR stations. 74 have already been removed with more scheduled through 2030. An aircraft relying on legacy navigation infrastructure for IFR flight will find its operational utility degraded over the coming years, and an RNAV RNP-capable avionics upgrade on an older panel easily runs $15,000 to $40,000 depending on the scope of integration required. Insurers and lenders increasingly treat avionics currency as a component of hull value assessment. An aircraft with a 1990s-era panel is not just operationally limited, it is financially depreciated in ways that compound the insurance problem. Fuel cost is the variable that ties everything together. Avgas 100 well has averaged above $6.50 per gallon at self-serve FBOs across the U.S. in 2024, with prices at full-serve facilities in high-cost states regularly exceeding €9. The environmental pressure on 100 LL, which contains tetraethyl lead, a substance the EPA has been formally moving against under the Clean Air Act, creates significant uncertainty about the long-term availability of the fuel that the vast majority of GA piston aircraft depend on. The FAA's Eliminate Aviation Gasoline Lead Emissions (EAGLE) initiative set a 2030 target for a transition to unleaded avgas, primarily UL94 and G100UL. The certification path for G100UL as a drop-in replacement for 100 LL is proceeding, but the distribution infrastructure is not. Widespread availability by 2027 is not guaranteed, and the transition costs, including potential engine modifications or operating limitation updates for certain power plants, will not be absorbed by the fuel industry. They will be passed to aircraft owners. The convergence of these forces, insurance market contraction, aging airframes, parts scarcity, technician shortage, avionics mandates, and fuel transition, is not a temporary market condition. It is a structural repricing of what it means to own a light aircraft in the United States and in most markets globally. The pilots who will survive this repricing are those who understand it clearly before their next renewal cycle, not after. The aircraft that will retain economic viability are those with young airframes, modern avionics, engines within the first half of their TBO, and liability profiles that underwriters can model with confidence. Everything else, and that is most of the fleet, is in a slow financial depreciation spiral that will accelerate between now and the end of the decade. The question for every GA owner is not whether these forces are real. The question is whether their airplane is on the right side of the line when the market finishes drawing it.